In a world that never stops talking, the rarest and most formidable power is the ability to become a ghost, to step back into the shadows of your own mind, and to let the noise of the collective pass over you without a single ripple. Most men are terrified of a quiet room, because when the external distractions are stripped away, they are forced to confront the chaotic, untamed state of their own souls. They mistake silence for isolation and solitude for loneliness, fleeing from the very environments where their inner sovereignty could actually be forged. Yet, if you look closely at the individuals who throughout history have built unshakable lives, you will find that their strength was not manufactured in the public square, nor was it sustained by the fragile approval of the crowd. It was chiseled out of dense blocks of silence, cultivated in moments where they consciously chose to stay alone, say less, and look inward. Marcus Aurelius did not govern the Roman Empire by reacting to every whisper in the Senate or every trivial crisis in the streets. He governed it by retiring nightly into the pages of his private journal, creating an internal fortress that no external storm could penetrate. He understood that the mind is the only true sanctuary, a place where a man can find complete tranquility, provided he knows how to close the door against the clamor of the world. When you analyze the modern condition, you quickly realize that the vast majority of human suffering stems from an inability to sit quietly in a room alone. We have been conditioned to believe that to be silent is to be weak, and to be alone is to be forgotten. We are urged to broadcast our plans, to state our opinions on matters we do not understand, and to constantly seek validation from a digital tribunal of strangers. This relentless exposure drains our psychic energy, leaving us hollowed out and completely dependent on external feedback loops. Every time you speak unnecessarily, every time you explain your choices to someone who has no stake in your life, you're leaking power. You are handing over a piece of your internal autonomy to a world that will consume it and give you nothing but fleeting attention in return. The Stoics recognized this vulnerability and practiced a form of strategic scarcity, recognizing that the man who is always available, always talking, and always reacting is ultimately a slave to his environment. By choosing to disappear from the public eye, even temporarily, you reclaim your attention, reset your focus, and establish an invisible boundary that forces others to respect your presence. When you finally choose to grant it, to master the art of saying less is to understand the profound mechanics of the dichotomy of control, the foundational pillar upon which all Stoic resilience rests. This principle demands that we draw a sharp, uncompromising line between what is up to us and what is not up to us. Your words, your intentions, and your internal judgments are entirely within your power. The thoughts of others, their criticisms, and the unpredictable turns of fate are completely outside of it. When you speak less, you naturally narrow your focus down to that small, essential domain of your own character. You stop trying to manipulate the perceptions of the crowd because you recognize that their opinions are fickle, shallow, and ultimately irrelevant to your moral worth. Epictetus frequently reminded his students that nature gave human beings 2 ears, and only one mouth for a reason, so that we might hear twice as much as we speak. When you observe the frantic rush of people trying to prove their intelligence, their wealth, or their status through words, you begin to see it for what it truly is, a confession of insecurity. The truly confident individual has no need to audition for the approval of the world. They find their validation entirely within the alignment of their own actions and principles. This deliberate retreat into silence is not an act of cowardice, nor is it a passive withdrawal from the duties of life. Rather, it is an aggressive, calculated gathering of strength, a form of radical self-discipline that allows you to conquer internal weakness before it manifests as external failure. Consider the immense effort it takes to stay silent when you are insulted, or to remain completely still when you are provoked. The natural, animalistic impulse within us wants to strike back, to defend our pride, and to match the volume of our aggressor. But the moment you react to a critic or a provocateur, you have allowed them to dictate your emotional state. You have surrendered your peace of mind to a person whose character you likely do not respect. By practicing silence in the face of provocation, you break the circuit of reaction. You create a critical space between the stimulus and your response, a space where your reason can step forward and neutralize the poison before it enters your bloodstream. In that quiet pause, you realize that the insult cannot harm you unless you choose to adopt it as your own reality. For as Marcus Aurelius noted, the best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury. This immunity to criticism is one of the ultimate dividends of a life rooted in solitude and self-reflection. When you spend significant time alone, detached from the endless commentary of society, you develop a clear, unbiased metric for your own value. You become the sole judge of your character, and you no longer look to the horizon for applause to verify that you are on the right path. Most men live their lives like actors on a stage, constantly shifting their performances to please whatever audience happens to be watching, losing their true identity in the process. They become terrified of condemnation because they have tied their self-worth to the fragile, shifting sand of public opinion. But when you anchor yourself in the quiet certainty of your own virtues, the praise of the crowd becomes as meaningless as the chirping of birds in the trees. You realize that a good thing is not made better by being praised, nor is a bad thing made worse by being blamed. An emerald does not lose its beauty because no one compliments its color. And gold does not lose its value because it remains buried deep within the earth, hidden from human eyes. Furthermore, the practice of strategic silence allows you to transform the inevitable obstacles of life into raw material for your own growth, a concept the Stoics referred to as amor fati, or the love of one's fate. When a sudden crisis hits, the common man immediately begins to complain, assigning blame to external circumstances and wasting precious energy in a futile protest against reality. The silent strategist, however, receives the blow without a word of complaint. They do not broadcast their misfortune to the world, nor do they indulge in self-pity. Instead, they retreat into the quiet laboratory of their own mind to analyze the situation with cold, objective rationality. They ask themselves a single transformative question: how can this specific adversity be used to strengthen my character? If they have been betrayed, it becomes an opportunity to practice self-reliance. If they have failed, it becomes a lesson in humility and strategy. If they are isolated, it becomes the perfect arena to cultivate deep, unshakable self-mastery. They understand that the impediment to action advances action, and what stands in the way becomes the way. To truly understand the power of this philosophy, one must look at how the ancient masters integrated these principles into the very fabric of their daily existence. Consider the example of Zeno of Citium, the founder of Stoicism, who lost everything he owned in a catastrophic shipwreck. He was left stranded in Athens, destitute and completely stripped of his previous life. A lesser man would have filled the air with laments, cursing the gods and demanding pity from anyone who would listen. Zeno, however, walked quietly into a bookstore, began reading the teachings of Socrates, and realized that his misfortune had cleared away all the superficial distractions that had previously consumed his attention. He later remarked that his voyage was prosperous because it was the very thing that forced him to shipwreck his body so that he could discover his soul. By remaining silent and refusing to view his circumstances through the lens of victimhood, he transformed a historical tragedy into the birthplace of a philosophy that would sustain empires. He did not seek to change the external event. He simply mastered his internal judgment of it. This level of mastery requires an unyielding commitment to delaying gratification and forging an unshakable focus on long-term goals. A process that can only occur when you strip away the desire for immediate social reward. When you keep your plans completely secret, you allow the psychological tension of your ambition to build up within you, acting as fuel for your labor. The modern trap is to speak about what you intend to do before you have actually done it. We announce our goals, our businesses, and our resolutions to the world because the mere act of speaking about them triggers a cheap, premature release of dopamine in the brain. We receive the social praise of the achievement without ever having endured the grueling work required to earn it. This subtle trap drains the very ambition needed to execute the plan. The Stoic path demands that you do the opposite. Work in complete silence, let your results do the talking, and allow your character to manifest through your actions rather than your declarations. Let men wonder what you are building, let them speculate on your absence, and let the finished product be the only statement you ever make. As you begin to implement this practice of staying alone and saying less, you will notice a distinct shift in how the world interacts with you. People are naturally drawn to that which is rare and mysterious, and they are instinctively unnerved by an individual who cannot be easily read or manipulated. When you refuse to fill every silence with nervous chatter, your words begin to carry weight. When you do speak, people listen because they know your statements are the product of deep, deliberate thought rather than a desperate attempt to avoid awkwardness. You become like a profound, deep body of water. Others cannot easily see the bottom, and so they approach you with a degree of caution and respect. This boundary is essential for protecting your internal peace as it screens out the toxic, chaotic individuals who thrive on emotional drama and constant external validation. You become an island of sanity in a turbulent sea of human neurosis, a point of absolute stability that others can look to. Even if they do not fully understand the source of your strength, achieving this state is not a matter of luck. It is a daily, compounding habit of choosing the difficult internal path over the easy external escape. It means waking up every morning and resolving to conquer the internal weakness that begs you to seek comfort, to check the opinions of others, and to look for shortcuts. It means actively seeking out moments of solitude throughout your day, stepping away from the digital grid and allowing your mind to settle into its natural clarity. It means recognizing that every craving for attention, every impulse to boast, and every desire to argue is simply a shadow cast by your own ego. When you look that ego dead in the eye and refuse to feed it, its power begins to wither away, replaced by a quiet, indestructible confidence that no external force can take from you. You realize that you have already been given everything you need to endure, to thrive, and to maintain your dignity. Regardless of what the world decides to do around you, the second phase of this journey requires an even deeper descent into the mechanics of your own mind, moving beyond the mere practice of physical isolation and entering the realm of complete psychological invulnerability. It is one thing to close the physical door to your room. It is an entirely different discipline to close the gates of your perception against the constant invasions of fear, desire, and regret. The true Stoic ghost does not merely hide from the world. He walks through it completely unaffected by its currents, like a solid mass of granite dividing a rushing river. When you master the art of being alone, even while standing in the middle of a crowded room, you have unlocked the ultimate form of strategic autonomy. You are no longer at the mercy of your environment, nor are you dependent on favorable circumstances to maintain your internal equilibrium. You recognize that the world can take away your possessions, your reputation, and even your physical freedom, but it can never touch the fundamental integrity of your choices unless you willingly hand it over. This absolute detachment from external events is not a state of cold, emotionless indifference, but rather a profound harmonization with reality as it unfolds. Most human suffering is caused by a constant internal friction, an exhausting refusal to accept things as they are. We want the weather to be different. We want people to be kinder. And we want our plans to succeed without a single hitch. When reality inevitably clashes with our expectations, we experience a violent surge of anger or despair. The individual who has cultivated the power of silence looks at this friction and realizes it is entirely self-inflicted. The external event is completely neutral. It is your internal commentary, your judgment of the event, that causes the pain. If you strip away the judgment, the pain vanishes instantly. When someone insults you, they are merely vibrating the air with sound waves. If you do not attach the label of injury to those sounds, your mind remains as calm and undisturbed as a mirror reflecting a passing storm dot. To build this level of psychological immunity, You must actively practice the discipline of voluntary discomfort, a technique the ancient Stoics used to ensure they never became soft or dependent on luxury. Seneca famously advised his friend Lucilius to set aside a certain number of days each month during which he would be content with the scantiest and cheapest fare, with coarse and rough dress, asking himself all the while if this was the condition that he had feared. By deliberately exposing yourself to scarcity, whether by fasting, sleeping on the floor, or intentionally stepping away from the comforts of modern technology, you break the psychological dependency that keeps you enslaved to external conditions. You realize that your survival and your happiness do not require the endless luxuries that society deems essential. When you know you can survive and remain content on the absolute bare minimum, you lose all fear of poverty, abandonment, or social exclusion. You become truly dangerous to the established order because you can no longer be bribed, threatened, or controlled through your desires. This liberation from fear allows you to approach your long-term goals with a level of clarity and focus that is completely foreign to the average person. When you are no longer distracted by the need to protect your ego or maintain a false public image, your mental energy is fully consolidated. You can direct the entire force of your intellect toward a single worthy objective, working with a relentless, quiet consistency that inevitably produces extraordinary results. While others are wasting their days chasing fleeting trends, seeking social approval, and reacting to every minor crisis on their screens, you are steadily building your empire in the shadows. You do not need to celebrate your progress publicly, nor do they need to understand your vision. The work itself becomes your reward, and the internal growth you experience through the process of creation is more than enough to sustain you through the longest, darkest nights of isolation. This process of quiet creation naturally demands that you guard your inner circle with a ruthless, uncompromising selectivity. When you value silence and strategic scarcity, you quickly realize that the vast majority of human interactions are incredibly low value, consisting of petty gossip, mutual validation, and complaints about circumstances that no one has the courage to change. Spending time with people who have no internal standard of excellence is like breathing in a subtle, slow-acting poison. It gradually degrades your own standards, erodes your discipline, and reintroduces the very anxieties you have worked so hard to eliminate. The Stoic path does not require you to be cruel or arrogant toward others, but it does require you to be fiercely protective of your attention. If a relationship does not elevate your character, if it does not challenge you to be more rational and self-disciplined, then it has no place in your life. It is far better to walk completely alone, wrapped in the dignified shroud of your own thoughts, than to lower your standards simply to avoid the discomfort of solitude. As you deepen your practice of this philosophy, you will inevitably confront the ultimate reality that faces every living being, the absolute transience of all things, or memento mori, the realization that your time on this earth is brief, unpredictable, and completely finite acts as a powerful catalyst for absolute self-mastery. When you keep the reality of your own mortality at the forefront of your mind, the trivial dramas of the world lose all their power over you. You realize how utterly absurd it is to spend your limited, precious days worrying about what a stranger thinks of you, or trying to seek revenge against someone who has wronged you. Both the person who insults you and the person who is insulted will be dust in a matter of decades, and the memory of their petty conflict will be completely erased from the history of the universe. In the grand scope of cosmic time, your life is nothing more than a single brief spark in an endless night. This realization does not induce despair. Rather, it grants you a profound, liberating clarity. It strips away all artificial anxieties and leaves you with a single urgent mandate: to master your own mind right now, in this present moment, and to live with absolute dignity and virtue. Living with this level of awareness transforms your entire relationship with existence. You stop viewing life as a series of random events happening to you, and you begin to view it as a continuous masterclass designed to test and refine your character. Every individual who crosses your path, whether they are a loyal friend or a malicious enemy, becomes a teacher. Every crisis becomes an examination, and every period of forced isolation becomes an invaluable opportunity to strengthen your internal fortress. You no longer look to the future for some distant, elusive state of happiness, because you recognize that true tranquility can only be found right here, in the quiet alignment of your present thoughts and actions. You have reached a state of internal self-sufficiency where you require nothing from the world to feel complete. And yet you are ready to receive whatever fate throws at you with an unshakable smile. The man who has mastered this philosophy does not need to shout to be heard, nor does he need to display his strength to be feared. His power is written in his posture, in the steady, unblinking calm of his gaze, and in the profound, heavy silence that surrounds his presence. He is a ghost to the superficial world, completely ungraspable by those who live on the surface of life. Yet he is entirely awake, alive, and rooted in the deep bedrock of reality. By choosing to stay alone, to say less, and to conquer the internal chaos of your own soul, you step out of the frantic, miserable matrix of the crowd and ascend to the rank of the true sovereign. You become the absolute master of your own destiny, an immovable monument of strength in a world of shifting sand. Maintain this silence. Protect this solitude, and let the quiet, invisible forge of your own character be the greatest work of art you ever create.